The New Order, revolutionizing the economic and labor order. What is the value of labor? If we ask a worker the question, he will say that it is the sum of money he receives in exchange for a task. He calls it a wage. But Marx says in his book, Wages, Labor and Capital, that this is something apparent because the worker actually sells his labor power, his productive capacity, and that this labor power is treated as a commodity. Divided by the wage corresponds to the use value, which is the value of the consumption of his labor power in a given time. This labor power also has an exchange value, i.e., it can be exchanged for other commodities. The wage is a monetary expression of the value of the labor power sold by the wage worker. This shows the exploitation to which the employee is subjected by the capitalist man. The wage received by the worker is less than the value generated by his labor time. The capitalist system seeks to lower the value of the wage below the value of labor power. This difference between the value and the price of labor power is a profit or surplus value. The value of labor in a capitalist system. The capitalist person sees the system of production as the process in which labor creates surplus value. This shows a difference of the labor process taking into account the living condition of man, from the valorization process having as its objective only the accumulation of capital. Consequently, the capitalist not only appropriates the final product of the labor process, but all the physical capacity of the worker, his skills, abilities, and experiences, which are used to increase the accumulation of capital, and thus the capitalist obtains his profits from the surplus value. Today, countries like Colombia, which has a large area in fields such as agriculture, have been exploited by the capitalist system for years, Colombia being a neoliberal country. It presents 13.70% unemployment rate, more than double the average of the OECD countries, and a labor exploitation that has been growing through the years, increasing poverty and reducing welfare for its inhabitants, thus having the worst balance between life and work, where 0 is the worst balance and 10 the best. And this is more reflected in the countryside. If we contrast the figures of 2022 with those of 2016, we see that there is no improvement. But on the contrary, the rate of labor exploitation in the countryside has increased by 2.3%. It is necessary to remember that informality is a situation that excludes the worker from having a minimum wage and a contributory regime. Gender inequality is another problem that persists in Colombian society, since women have been discriminated against and relegated in their development as professionals for many years. In the country, the female population has an unemployment rate of 14.4%, while 8.1% of men are unemployed. Therefore, there are many voices that have demanded changes in the country's labor legislation to reduce informality and establish ways of accessing more favorable labor conditions, especially in the rural areas. For example, the flexibilization of the labor regime. Understanding the source of these problems and confronting them is key to guaranteeing the sustainability of the growth of production systems with common welfare, whose functioning depends on the labor market. In Colombia, would it be possible for the value of work to have a different meaning and be valued not in the economic sense but in the sense of capabilities, as an activity that enriches and generates a transforming effect on the world and on others? There are examples of alternative ways of producing value. We will show two examples, one in France and the other in Latin America. In 1973, France, L'Affaire Lip. During a meeting in which the workers were threatened with bankruptcy, some workers snatched the briefcase from one of the directors and learned that the management planned 480 layoffs and intended to get rid of the mechanical industry and related sectors, keeping only the watchmaking. Manager Laverny and others were sequestered for a night in order to find out more. The workers forced them to announce the results of the negotiations in Paris. Searching the offices, they also learned that the management intended to abolish the sliding scale of wages and freeze them. The Palant factory was immediately occupied. During the night, stocks of 25,000 watches were placed in hiding places. On June 15th, a demonstration gathered 1,200 people in the streets of Bisanca. A general assembly decided to resume production, under workers' control, to guarantee a survival wage. The lip struggle was then popularized with the slogan, "It is possible, we manufacture, we sell, we get pay." In August, negotiations began between the Action Committee and the middleman. Then, the mobile guards entered the factory and expelled the workers who had occupied it. They remained there until February 1974. On hearing this news, many companies in Besançon and in the region went on strike, and the workers even clashed with the police. The trade unionists intervened to prevent the confrontation. This did not prevent arrests and convictions during the demonstrations which took place in the following days. On September 29th, a great national march was organized on Besançon. Nearly 100,000 people demonstrated under torrential rain. It was the March of 100,000. In October, the Prime Minister, Pierre Mesmer, announced, "Lip, it's over." Behind the scenes, he finally negotiated with the unions, suppliers, and financiers with the aim of taking over the Lip company. On January 29, 1974, the Lip delegation signed the Dole Agreement, which provided for the return of all personnel in exchange for the return of 7 tons of documents and material, between 15,000 and 20,000 watches. In Latin America, we can also find examples of alternative ways to produce value, such as the Argentine workers' movement and the seizure of factories. On August 3, 1930s, the organized labor movement launched a plan of struggle with the aim of demanding from the government the change of economic, social, and political structures. The means of struggle used was the so-called open meetings, which consisted of public acts and rallies, in which different speakers put forward their positions and proposals in relation to the national situation. They are held in many cities of the country during August and September. The struggle is carried out with a high degree of discipline and organization. Doors are closed, communications with the exterior are cut off. In some cases, the workers place barricades in front of the access doors of the workplaces. In all cases, activities are paralyzed. In many occupations, hostages are taken from among the owners, management, technical, administrative, and security personnel as a preventive measure against possible police repression. The occupations last between 4 and 6 hours, except in the last operation, when they last 24 hours. In those occupations in which the owners file a complaint, a federal judge and the police come to the scene and order the workers to vacate the premises. In general, the workers comply with the eviction order almost immediately, although in some cases they resist the judicial and police action before finally complying with it. However, this struggle culminated in 1936 with an agreement between socialists and trade unionists. Following these initial agreements, several unions joined together in another organization, the Union Sindical Argentina. In order to obtain a change, it is necessary to begin by modifying the structures of thought of the company. A system of production using the system of cooperatives is proposed in Colombia. We begin by eliminating surplus value from the production system, since it leads to the exploitation of the worker. To achieve this, the productive system must be reformed, which would no longer have as its objective the creation of surplus value but the creation of the common good. In the new system, the value of the goods of production will be determined by the sum of the value of labor power and the materials of production. How would it work? In order to integrate Colombian society, what is proposed is the creation of an alternative production system to the one that dominates the current production system. This new autonomous production system will emerge as a union of different cooperatives. In Colombia, there are 3 important guilds: agricultural, industrial, and tourism, which are distributed throughout Colombia. Each of these guilds would have a headquarters in each city, which will have a board of workers, from which will coordinate the purchase prices, sales, and work policies of the non-profit production system. As proposed by Bernard Friot in his book Emancipating Work, concrete steps must be taken to replace a capitalist practice, and this would result in changes in the self-organization of employees in company and the control of investment, retirement and social security financing, resources for young people, unemployment compensation. A change must be made in the prejudices that we have of the capabilities of both men and women, because having a little clarity about all the effects that inequality generates, we are aware that we must seek a change for the proper development of society within this nation. The objective of this alternative system is to create a resistance by means of a voluntary organization structure that will always be open to the addition of informal vendors, control, and democratic organization. Each guild of the production of goods and services will be organized with this system of collective and cooperative work. The entire production system will be coordinated by a board of workers, representatives of each of the production companies or cooperatives. There will no longer be an absolute hierarchy, headed by an organization that controls capital. Instead, they will be directed by a collective of members who are the workers themselves. There would be no profit motive. There would be no interest in creating surplus value, but rather in benefiting all the people who are part of it. This work system would not focus only on production but also on the welfare of the people. We will promote more access to leadership fields where women can participate and thus generate more equitable opportunities. We will avoid the stereotyping of women according to their biological functions, or as Sylvia Federici calls it in her book Patriarchy of the Wage, a reproductive work. For this it is necessary to support all those housewives who contribute with this work and that this is remunerated. Each person would no longer be valued for the amount of time worked, but for their capacity, their experience, their work done. Workplaces are always open and voluntary for all those people willing to use their services and willing to work there without discrimination of gender, race, social class, political or religious position.